Good day and welcome to MSUA's Game Changers Live, where we speak with satellite industry leaders and talk to you about the trends of the future and what you need to know about where satellite mobile connectivity is headed. I'm your host, Lisa Dreher, and I'm really excited to introduce our guest for today, Vagan Shakhgildian. He is the president of Comtech Satellite Network Technologies Corp. Welcome to the show, Vagan.
Thank you, Lisa. Very glad to be here. It's a very exciting forum, and thank you very much for inviting me to take part in this discussion.
Great. Well, our pleasure. Maybe you can start by just giving us a little bit of background on yourself and Comtech.
Right. Well, I'm an engineer and have been in the industry for over 30 years. Starting my career as a modem designer, worked for a number of companies. And as a digital signal processing expert, and program manager, business manager, and so on. So worked for Motorola Cell Infrastructure Group, then also for Adaptive Broadband for a while, almost 10 years for Advantech Wireless, and finally was one of the co-founders of UHP Networks, which we kind of built up from very humble beginnings to the point when it was sold last year to Comtech Telecommunications. And now I'm very happy to be part of the Comtech team. So Comtech, as many of you know, is actually a public company. It's one of the kind of stalwarts of the SATCOM industry, SATCOM equipment manufacturer, but also provider of next generation 911 wireless solutions and location-based services for the wireless industry. And so it's a company listed on NASDAQ, as I mentioned. I, in particular, am responsible for the VSAT networking component at CSNT, or Comtech Satellite Network Technologies Group. So that's basically who we are. That's what we do, and that's my background.
Fantastic. Thank you for that background. Maybe we can start by having you talk a little bit about what you see as the most important changes that we'll see over the next, 3 to 5 years for satellite mobile connectivity.
I think the answer is pretty obvious, right? So the most important changes are those that everyone is talking about. So in the first instance, it's those global constellations that are coming online. Everyone knows their name and no particular order. It's the Starlink, which is up there. OneWeb, it's up and coming Kuiper by Amazon, Telesat Lighting. So this sort of, not to mention, of course, the geostationary solutions and mPOWER by SAS. And there are too many now to actually list those in this conversation. So what is clear is that they will revolutionize availability of satellite resources, spectrum, capacity. They will pose a few challenges as well in kind of harnessing the power that they offer. In addition, we will have those software-defined satellites that Intelsat and others are launching, and that opens new avenues, new possibilities in terms of connectivity services, both mobile and fixed. And this is probably the most important trend that is developing in front of us.
What do you see as some of the most important use cases that these new constellations and maybe existing constellations will play in that mobile connectivity space?
Right. So obviously, by definition, all of those non-geo systems are global, right? So in order to provide coverage, any meaningful coverage continuously, these have to be global systems. So then, at the drop of the hat, so to speak, of course, a lot of effort and money went into launching and designing those constellations. We have systems with global coverage, which essentially is the holy grail of mobile satellite communications, right? So so whether it's maritime connectivity or aero, the goal is always to have global coverage without any white spots, so to speak, any gaps. For years and years, polar areas were not particularly well covered. Whoever traveled in the olden days from North America to Asia on those aircrafts flying over the North Pole can testify to that. So all these problems will go away once some or all of those global constellations are up and running. So that's one use case right there, global connectivity, which will become available by definition, by design of those systems. So there is also a lot of investment that doesn't have to be as such non-geo, but given the enormous amount of investment that goes into such systems and the complexity of building satellite ground terminals, it can be expected that there will be very innovative solutions designed in conjunction with those global constellations that whether it's flat panel, electronically steerable antenna, compact, perhaps not so flat panel, so to speak, electromechanical systems, you can expect some very innovative solutions, a lot of design effort going into whether it's ASICs or kind of phase array elements and whatnot. And we should expect some new use cases arising linked to those compact terminals on the ground.
Got it. Great. I thought I was going to sneeze there for a second.
That's okay. That's okay. I can do the
So,
sneezing for you.
maybe we can talk a little bit about the most important criteria that users of satellite mobile connectivity should be considering as they're looking at various satellite services providers.
The reliability of service and quality of service overall, reliability of equipment, network availability, in other words, minimum or no outages in connectivity is still considered to be the best and the most all-embracing quality of the network that the users are seeking. So these days it's almost commonplace to say this, but the users do not really care whether or not connectivity is provided over the satellite, over terrestrial means, wireless or wireline. They want to ensure seamless coverage and similar or identical quality of service as they roam through regions, countries, and that's basically what the users are expecting. So seamless coverage. No one wants to hear about handovers from beam to beam and some dropped calls or lost connections, lost sessions, packets, and so forth associated with that. They want to have seamless, high quality connectivity services.
Of course. What's the best way for a user to ensure that that is what they're actually going to get when they sign a contract?
Okay, well, that's a very interesting question. So is it a matter of contract negotiation, or actually, well, the first advice is actually to read your contract to the user. So a lot of people don't do that, and so maybe there is a small print, kind of best effort services, outages, and then they find out that that service is not what they expected. Fundamentally, it's perhaps a first step. And the second step is we're not calling on users. We're the kind of technical experts to study and make calls, choices with regard to the frequency bands. I mean, some people ask this question: is KU band fundamentally better than KA band, and so on and so forth? Clearly, there is no answer. There is no answer. Clear answer with regard to frequency band selection. Depends on the overall network design as opposed to on some sort of a simple criteria that they can use. But of course, especially if it is a professional user, if it's a user who obviously expects to have some quality of service and maybe is basing their quality of service as a network administrator on VLANs and management VLANs. So as an example, they should ask those questions about quality of service, about the kind of knobs that are available from the service provider to adjust the quality of service, design and devise their own quality of service policies, the degree of autonomy and decision making that the user will be having within the confines of the satellite mobile connectivity. So I think these are the more flexibility you have in the service, and maybe I should have mentioned flexibility earlier, the more kind of variables you can have that you can meaningfully adjust, provided that this adjustment is not too complicated, does not require a PhD in kind of network QoS, then this is what they should search and look for in their contracts and their agreements with the service provider.
Great. Are there new technologies that are coming into the market that users should really be paying attention to and looking at right now?
The new technologies are coming into the market all the time. So it's the big items that we covered early in this conversation, the fact that those constellations comprising hundreds, in some cases thousands of satellites are being launched with a very impressive cadence, and that they're obviously all being flown and controlled and so on and so forth. That in itself is actually quite staggering. So that in itself is a revolution in our industry. But in addition to that, I should mention a few other points that they're rather different, covering a broad range of spectrum, excuse the pun. From new, let's start with issues directly related to spectrum. We are reading these days, and not only reading, but we at Comtech are actually intimately involved in supporting new frequency bands. Even though I kind of stated earlier that frequency band in itself doesn't necessarily impact quality of service, but availability of spectrum is very much dependent on the spectrum, on the frequency band. And so we're talking about V band, we're talking about Q band, not to be confused with KU. And so these are the kind of new frequency bands that are opening up. There are more and more filings of new constellations on those bands, not to mention the optical band as well. So that's one new exciting technology. Another technology that is certainly worth mentioning is artificial intelligence and machine learning. So a very different kettle of fish, so to speak, in the sense that as applied to network management, and again, we at Comtech are very much looking at that. So as applied to network management, in machine learning and artificial intelligence allows us to look for various discrepancies, anomalies in the network, troubleshoot, if you will, but by automatic means, analyze the network performance, figure out whether this network performance is as per the intended design, or somehow, as I mentioned, that there is an anomaly, and if there is an anomaly, what actually causes it, and looks into this, and that's all done by means of artificial intelligence or AI. So that's another very exciting technology that I think we should definitely be pursuing and developing further.
That is really exciting. When you talk about some of these newer bands, what types of use cases are those most appropriate for? You said Q and a couple of others. What would you use those for in particular?
That's a great question. These days, right now, as we speak in March 2022, I'm not aware of a lot or many or any, quite frankly, user terminals operating in about 40 gigahertz. I'm sure there are some, but especially in the mobile environment. So I would say that mostly right now, the use cases for those technologies are limited to feeder links and trunking. So that's the most widely used. So of course TTNC as well, but all the things that are not necessarily connecting directly to the user terminals. That said, there is a lot of research going into implementing equipment operating in those bands, and I think the day will come in not so distant future, then the use of those bands will extend to the actual user terminals, consumer premises equipment, or whatever you like to, whichever way you like to describe those.
Great, great. And then you were talking about the AI piece and everything and how that can really make our satellite networks, I guess, smarter and more responsive. What do you see as, I guess, that progressing down the path further over the next, several months and or years?
So there's a lot of this. Again, the constellations that are currently flying and those that will be flying soon. When we talk about hundreds of satellites, complex trajectories, we talk in some cases about hybrid systems. That's another innovation that is coming. Ground equipment that allows you to actually support both geostationary and non-geostationary, perhaps also mix it up with terrestrial connectivity, with least cost routing, and so on. So just to implement radio resource management or satellite resource management in those systems, that requires a considerable effort. So I think those artificial intelligence principles of essentially of learning, machine learning, adaptability will be fully deployed in those scenarios where not only you want to have a best effort connectivity in some rural environment and you're very happy if a few hours a day you can watch Netflix. When this technology will start being relied upon for very critical applications and will become vital in those applications. So I think in those cases, the complexity of the problem, how do you provide quality of service in truly congested networks? Because sometimes it's not always obvious to certain customer communities that actually if the network is not congested, the traffic load is low compared to the total available bandwidth, then there is no need for quality of service. Essentially, it comes kind of free without any significant efforts. It's when the networks become loaded, then quality of service and special tools and mechanisms designed into the system requiring those complex decision rules based on artificial intelligence. So in this case, it becomes vital and critical for the success.
Absolutely. And with everything that's going on in the world, I think those things are becoming even more important. So, Vagan, I want to thank you so much for being here today and sharing your insights with us. This has been an amazing session, and we would love to have you back again soon to maybe dig a little bit deeper into some of these topics.
Absolutely. I think today's session, obviously in a short session, we can only cover this much. There is one fascinating area as a kind of parting shot I should mention. It's connectivity from remote devices directly, mobile terrestrial devices directly over satellite, whether it's an S-band or similar bands. That is a big topic. There's a lot of work that is going on. Everyone heard about the companies that are kind of pushing the frontiers in that regard. We're somewhat involved in this too. And next time we meet, I look forward to discussing those with you, Lisa, and with the audience.
That would be great. I also want to take a moment to thank the Mobile Satellite Users Association. You can visit the MSUA's website at msua.org and learn all about how to become a member of the organization and read our weekly newsletter that gives you all the latest on satellite mobile connectivity news and events. We really hope to see you next time on MSUA's Game Changers Live.
Thank you very much.